buying a property subject to the existing loan refers to purchasing a property while using the existing financing. It is different from an assumption, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons right now about the subject to purchase. Essentially, the buyer takes ownership of the home and the mortgage remains in place as it is. This method of acquiring property has gained a lot of popularity recently. It's become with real estate investors. There are people that it's appropriate for. Like all investment strategies, there are some risks, some pros and cons, and things we need to talk about not only as the purchaser, but also as the seller. And we're going to address both of those today. First, we're going to go through the pros of the subject to purchase. The number one reason people do subject to is the low down payment, frequently no down payment. All you have is closing costs, zero down payment, and you bought yourself a house. It's an incredibly effective way to buy a property with little or no money down. The number two pro is that you can avoid traditional financing. Now, there are many reasons why you might avoid traditional financing. One, you might have a bad credit score and you're either unqualified or your interest rates are really high. Maybe the loan that you're taking over has a lower interest rate than prevailing interest rates today, so you win there. Or perhaps you already own 10 properties in your own name and the banks just won't lend you make you another loan for another property in your name. Another reason you might go and buy subject to. The number three advantage, faster closing. To buy a property subject to is it can take a matter of days at most. The hard part is actually the title work. So depending on how you do the title work, some people will do the title work themselves and then they'll do it basically a kitchen table closing. They call in a notary and they can knock it out in a matter of the next day or the day after. It's actually incredibly fast when you buy subject to. Conversely, a typical home loan, 21 to 30 days is the fastest you can do, and an assumption might be 3, 4, or 5 months. And the number four item is flexibility. The buyers and sellers, they can negotiate various terms, just about anything, which offers a very flexible structure that should be beneficial to both parties. Now, on the flip side, there are some downsides to the subject to purchase. The number one boogeyman in the closet is the due on sale clause. Now, what is the due on sale clause? When you go out as a homeowner and buy a home with a normal mortgage from a bank, one of the things it's going to say a due on sale. And what it says is if I, the homeowner, take this home and sell it to somebody else, the bank is going to call that note due, right? They're going to say, hey, you sold it, you owe me money, because your name's on that loan, not somebody else's. And you just sold the collateral, so we want our money, right? Makes sense. Now, here's the thing. They're not obligated to execute the due on sale clause. They have the right to invoke the due on sale clause. And here's the thing. If I turn around and sell this property to somebody else and they continue to make payments to the bank on this note that's in my name, the bank is happy. The bank is there to make money. The bank is there to take interest payments from somebody. And to be honest, they really don't care who. As long as it's getting paid, they're happy. The number two risk for a subject to transaction is the risk of foreclosure. What happens if that buyer suddenly stops making payments? Well, I don't own the property anymore. Somebody else does, right? And they're making payments in my name and they stop making it. Well, I don't own the property anymore. And the bank could say, hey, I'm going to foreclose on that property. Well, they could go take the property. It's going to be a hit on my credit, but I've already sold the house. I'm done. Somebody else is going to have to lose their house. So that other person is living in it or renting it. They're going to suddenly lose it when the bank comes and takes it. So they still lose the house. The caveat is the seller now has this credit hit on their credit history. Now, there's some things that they can do in the event that happens. Discussion for a different day. There is a way to protect the seller in the event that the buyer stops making payments. Okay. Another con of the subject to loan is kind of right there with the pro, which is what are the terms of the loan? So interest rate might be incredibly low. Great. Well, what if they're high? You're stuck with them. What if it's an adjustable rate? The new buyer is stuck with that adjustable rate mortgage. They don't have the option to buy down the rate or fix it with additional points or anything like that. The only thing they can do is refinance or sell it. It's the only way they can change those terms. And if they refinance, they might have to bring money to the closing table. And if they refinance, they might have to bring money to the closing table in order to make the refinance happen, which is what they were trying to avoid by doing the subject to in the first place. Another big con to the subject to is the potential for negative cash flow for the new owner if it's a rental property. What do I mean by that? Is a lot of times the seller for a property, when they sell subject to the existing mortgage, there's probably a reason they're doing it. A lot of times that reason is that they owe a lot of money on the house They have little or no equity in the home. And if they sold it on the open market, they'd have to bring money to the table. They don't have enough equity to actually sell the property. And they may even be at the point where they say, well, I have to do a short sale, or I'm facing foreclosure. And then somebody else comes in and says, I'll take over your payments. Well, those payments might be so high that they actually exceed the prevailing rent for the area. So as a professional investor, you have to evaluate, hey, if I'm buying this property and it has a very high principal, interest, taxes, insurance rate that is greater than the prevailing rent, it may still be a deal if it's got a whole bunch of equity in there, right? My net worth just went up, or perhaps I believe that I can raise rents in the future, or maybe I can do a value add to the property to make it better, where all of a sudden it's worth more. Lots of different discussion items in there. It depends on the property and your personal situation. Just realize that that is a common thing that sometimes when you go subject to, it's kind of expensive and it may not cash flow positive. In which case, why are you buying it? If it's for cash flow, bad idea. If it's for net worth and equity appreciation, maybe it's a good idea. And the last big con for the subject to is complexity. It's not as simple as just going out and getting a conventional loan and putting 20% down or 10% down and buying a property. It's a little more complicated than that. There's a lot of forms. There's third-party authorizations, limited power of attorneys. You're on the phone a lot. And depending on who the lender is, they have their own different forms, right? Freedom Mortgage, incredibly easy to work with. Navy Federal Credit Union, less so, right? And it's all kind of who you're dealing with and what the forms are. And you may find yourself making repeated phone calls day in and day out. You're going to have to take great records. You're going to have to keep a binder just for each property that says, here's who I talked to. Here's the date and time. This is what they said. This is what I sent. I sent it by secure email, all those different things so that you make sure that everything happens. And I will tell you from experience that even when you do everything right, somehow you miss a payment. How does that happen? I sent the payment. Well, guess what? The bank says, well, this hand didn't talk to that hand, and we didn't realize that it was for that loan. So you missed a payment. And what happens then? So that's where the big thing with subject to comes in, and a little motherhood. Anybody who is buying a property subject to needs to be of the utmost highest moral character. If you are a sketchy individual, do not do subject to. You are taking advantage of people probably, and it is a bad idea. I've done subject to before. I find myself of a higher moral character. Even though I missed a payment one time, I paid it back with a little bit of interest, I might add, because I'm like, wow, that is not supposed to happen. There are people out there who you do, if as a seller, if they are a sketchy individual, you do not want to work subject to with them. You do not want to do it. You want to make sure that they have a track record and that they have references and they can show you they've done this before. Obviously, everybody needs their first time to do something. Do you really want to be the first person that they work with, right? So think about that hard before you go into business with somebody. The other piece of warning that I have for folks is veterans VA benefits. The other piece of motherhood that I have for you is VA benefits for a seller. So if you are selling your home subject to, and you have a VA loan in place, that has part of your VA entitlement tied up in that property, okay? If you sell that, it goes over, you retitle it in the buyer's name, and you go subject to, the loan is going to stay in your name. Guess what? Your VA entitlement stays with that property. Even though you sold it and you move to your next duty station, you do not get that entitlement back until that loan is paid off, right? That's the requirement to get your entitlement back. So if you are selling a VA loan by subject to, you need to know exactly what the exit strategy is for the buyer. Now, I will tell you, I have bought 2 properties with VA loans subject to. Now, what I did was a little bit different. As a veteran myself, I said, hey, you guys have a VA loan. You need to make sure that we're going to make sure you get your VA benefits back. Do you need them in the next 3 to 6 months? Because if the answer is yes, I'm not doing it subject to. The answer was no in both cases that I did this. I said, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. I'll promise to get this paid off or refinanced or sold within the next 6 to 12 months. And if not, we'll come up with something else, maybe a re-option period or something like that. But the intention was to get them their VA benefits back. Now, I have a business to run. I have a reputation to maintain. I know that it is in my best interest and their best interest to get their VA entitlement back to make sure that they can go out and get another VA loan. And you need to be able to do the same. If you are intending to buy a property subject to an existing loan and it has a VA loan on it, and you are thinking, I'm just going to hold this for the next 20 years, all I have to say is shame on you, because that person is going to lose their VA entitlement for the next 20 years if you do that. Okay, so don't do that. If you're a veteran, be very careful. I would say even call me before you do that. Call an attorney. Make sure you know what you're getting into before you agree to it. Okay. And then story time. I had an instance where a wholesaler called me up. A wholesaler, somebody who gets a property under contract and says, I don't want to buy it myself. I'm going to sell the deal to somebody else. So they wanted me to pay him $10,000 or $20,000 for the opportunity to buy this property subject to. I said, great, send me the information on the deal. And I start looking at it and I go, hey, is this a VA loan? If so, I have a whole bunch of questions. And I ripped off all my questions for him in an email. Guess what? Absolute silence. The dude ran away because he knew that he was in the wrong. This wholesaler was trying to sell off this Sub2 deal for a VA loan, and he was going to try and take advantage of that veteran. So the first thing I did is like, hey, that's a problem. And then I started trying to reach out to the veteran to warn him. Okay. And if you're an investor, you're the buyer and you're buying subject to, if you're not of the highest moral character yourself, don't do these deals, because let's face it, you don't want to find yourself in a courtroom, because that's eventually where that'll go. All right. In conclusion, subject to can be a powerful tool for acquiring real estate for an investor, and it's a great option for certain sellers when they need to get rid of a property and they just can't afford to sell it on the open market themselves. It's essential to understand both the benefits and risks and the pros and the cons from both sides of this equation. And investors should thoroughly analyze any deal before they agree to it, and sellers should do the same and absolutely seek legal representation before signing any paperwork when it comes to a Sub2 deal. If you have any questions, give me a call.